Kem Cho, my friend. Kem Cho means hi, how are you in Gujarati, which is the mother tongue of our guest, Nipun Mehta. Good to see that you're interested in watching this optional video of my interview with Nipun. Let me begin by giving you a little bit of a background on Nipun. As I mentioned in the last video, he's one of the most inspiring human beings I know. He's super smart, he's well educated, I think he's good looking, he's very articulate. He's the kind of person that I think could have been very successful at almost anything that he chose to do. In the mid-1990s, after graduating from Cal Berkeley with a computer science degree, Nipun started working for Sun Microsystems. But within 2 years of working there, Nipun realized that he wasn't finding the working for corporate America to be as meaningful as he found volunteering his services at a hospice, and in general, being helping people out. People in need out. So he resigned from Sun, and along with a few other like-minded individuals, he started volunteering full-time. Eventually, he and his like-minded friends started something called ServiceSpace. ServiceSpace oversees a bunch of initiatives all around the world, and they're all aimed at spreading kindness and well-being. With that minimal background, let me get to my interview with Nipun. As you will see, I start by asking Nipun how he dared to do something so different from what most of us are coached and socialized to do. What was he thinking when he decided that he would give up a conventional life, or a life involving climbing up the corporate ladder, making a lot of money, in order to pursue a life of social service and volunteering?
It's like, how dare I, Yeah. I think for me, the thing was that it was really rooted in my personal experience. So I saw that a lot of people around me were going with the de facto sort of standard that, you go out and you get and you get and you accumulate, and he who has the most toys wins. That's sort of the narrative underneath a lot of the action, and that's the dream that you buy into when you're in college. And that was the dream that I bought into. But I saw a lot of people. I was really fortunate because I was in the Silicon Valley. And I came out right at the time of like the dot-com sort of boom. And so I saw all these people, trying to achieve it, and you achieved it and that was a time of we were all on steroids, like people were achieving things in 2 years, what it would take a generation to achieve. And so you saw a lot of people spike up and then just crash down. And you saw that journey not really fulfill them. And they often ended up being depressed, or they would do these crazy things that wouldn't make them happy or those around them happy. And so a part of me started questioning, just seeing all that, and just being a rational person. I was like, does that make sense? Or is there another way? And I think this is where I was like, wow, I don't know if there's another way. Being an immigrant family, and you're sort of really cradled into a certain dream as well, and your job is to get good grades and then go to a good college and then get a good job and then go start a company and then become a millionaire and all this stuff, right? Get married and have a car and have 5 cars and have a huge house, and and I think for me, I at some point I started questioning that in my early 20s. And I said, well, is there another way? And what is that other way? And I started to say, well, if greed isn't going to do it for you, how about doing its opposite, which was generosity? What if we just went out and did something purely for the love of it? And we realized that, that was very liberating. We did a lot of projects, right? But it wasn't even about the projects. It was how you felt at the end of doing a small action. Like, it just felt right. And so you're left with thinking, wow, I want to do this again. It felt so great, to be connected, to give with no strings attached, like no logo, no prices, no fame, nothing. We didn't want anything, and just that simple act of giving, you would think that you're actually on the losing end, because what am I getting in return? But it turns out you actually get a lot in return. So you get a sense of connection, like you were saying. So I think that, for me, just doing those experiments is what really led me to continue. I think it was Oprah, if I'm not mistaken, once asked the Dalai Lama, she says, what do you know for sure? Right? Very simple question. And Dalai Lama says, it takes giving to be happy. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it, is that the size of the act or the impact of the act almost doesn't matter. It's the space that you're holding. And if you offer from that space of genuine, just like one-way love, right, you will, in effect, what happens is any small act of generosity or any big act of generosity, on the outside it could be small or big, but what actually happens inside you is that whenever you move from me to we, right? Because you're saying it's not just about me, now it's about me and you, so it becomes a we experience. And when there's that shift from me to we, the mind quiets down. And in that calmness of the mind, it falls into more of its natural state. Right? I mean, of course, ultimate stillness would be great, but even if it's like stiller, if you're at point A and you go to a stiller point of point B, in that stiller state, to the degree that your mind is calmer is the degree to which you feel more interconnected. And the more interconnected you are, the simpler you are, the more satisfaction you have, the more happy you are, right? So it seems like a very small act of kindness, but the greatest impact of that small act of kindness is not even the ripple it goes out and creates in the world, not the awards you might get, not the attention you might get, not even the feedback that you might get back in return, but actually what's happening to you there and then in your own mind, in your own state of being, right? So the mind calms down, you fall into an interconnectedness, and you're happier. Right? So it's an incredible, so if you start to look at it in that way, and that if I'm different, most people serve the world to say, oh, look at this person, let me help them. Right? I mean, there's this famous quote that says, if you help, you see life as weak. Right? It's like this hand-me-down thing. If you fix, right, you see life as broken. And so much of development work is, oh, let me go fix it, and there's some good to it, but there's also, on the receiving end is like this sense of brokenness. But when you serve, you see life as whole, right? And so how do you so when you're looking at service from this state of like inner transformation, then you start to really have a very different perspective on it. And if you change for the rest of eternity, it's like going to have its own ripple effect. You may not necessarily be able to quantify it in terms of how many schools I built in some country where there's really extreme poverty, but like this is equally, that's valuable too, but this is also valuable because you're changing yourself, you're changing the eyes through which you look at the world, and that's creating an incredible ripple out. Your mind starts to become more natural. Right. So it's not that because a lot of people look at calmness and say, no, I actually like the busyness. You go in New York, there's all this stuff happening on the streets, and you're like, yeah, that's great. So this is not that kind of calmness, right? This is more that the mind is more natural. And in its natural state, if you look at, even if you study all the different saints across the world, across time, right, they will all say it's natural to be compassionate, to be kind, to be generous, to be tolerant, to be forgiving, right? Because fundamentally we're all interconnected, and all of them get to that in so many different ways. So for me, I don't know if I would define it necessarily as a calmness I think it's a byproduct, but you may actually get to a state where there's a lot of activity, and you're not necessarily calm in the traditional sense of the word, but you feel natural.
Natural.
And I think how do you put yourself in a state of naturalness? And you can try. I mean, I think you can wait for research to figure this out, or you can just try. There's really two choices, right? If you can be me-centered or you can be other-centered. And you can try being me-centered. I have tried it, and I've found in my limited experience, nonetheless, that it's a bottomless bucket. The more and more you pour into the me, it's still never satisfied, versus if you start to go into the we-centeredness, you fall into a natural state. You stop pretending that you need to do anything. You don't have the weight of the world. You're not like in a rush to get to the next thing. And you have less fear. You're not worried about, how this thing is going to go away from you. It's just a more natural, relaxed state of being. And I think I would just say experiment. I mean, there are those people who really wait for science, and that's great. There's a lot of science behind it. I'm aware of a lot of it. But I think for me, it's just been, it's a more natural way of being, and I do think it's natural to be connected and to be happy and to be to be accepting of all things that come our way. The basic idea of Karma Kitchen, as you know, is that you walk into Karma Kitchen and you have a meal, and the check at the end of your meal reads 0, and it's 0 because someone before you has paid for you, and you pay forward for people after you. And so most people look at that and say, wait, you mean you trust people to pay forward? Like, and if we are, self-interested, maximal thing for me kind of animals, then, we would just not leave anything. And we said, yeah, maybe, and then maybe we'll be broke and we'll find out. And we found out that actually people pay. But what is it that makes it work? Can everything work in this way? Probably not. So if you start to look deeper into it, is your Lexus car dealership, if you say pay what you want, is that going to really work? No. That would be my guess. But why does Karma Kitchen work? And I think one of the core things around generosity, around our response of generosity, when we see other people's generosity and when we receive generosity, is the context. Right, so you have to create a very powerful context. Now, if you had a buffet line and you go out and you say, well, everyone take whatever food you want and then eat whatever you want, take care of your, take care of your own table and then, leave some money over there, it's not going to be Karma Kitchen. It's not going to trigger a response of generosity, of compassion, of connection, none of that. But if you walk in and you see that, oh, it's a volunteer-run restaurant, so the person who's at the door, it doesn't feel like someone is like cooking up some, they're trying to manipulate you in some way. It's like a volunteer saying, look, I could be at home watching TV, but instead I'm here. And then you and they explain it with, there's just this effusive smile, and you feel that. They explain the idea, and you're just like, wow, some people break down in tears just there. Right? And then they come in, and they start to see, wow, the whole place is all volunteer run. Like there's a guy in the back doing dishes. There's somebody plating. There's somebody, serving your tables and cleaning your tables. And all of them have volunteered. And they're volunteering just to give me this experience. Right? And then you sit down, you have a meal. When you sit on this table, underneath the table, there's a positive quote. Right? So it starts to get you thinking in that way. So now you're in a different frame of reference, but now there's this nice quote. On the side, you see that, oh, there's a kindness table. This is where people have left all kinds of goodies just to, for other guests. Right? On your table might be a note that somebody who came before you on that table left for you. And then you write for somebody after you. Right? In between, especially if you have kids, you're waiting for your meal, and the server comes and they bust out a smile deck. A smile deck is a deck of cards with a kindness idea on each card, right? And it's like a fun little game. You shuffle up the cards, you pick a card, and you have to go out and do that act of kindness. So it's like, and kids love it, right? And it's the kind of thing where you hear it and you say, well, what's the big deal? But when it actually happens, and in that process of actually taking that card and saying, wow, now am I going to do it? Your brain starts to release very different kind of chemicals, and you feel, very different, right? And then in between all of this, you may take a look at the restaurant and you're like, wow, no one is paying for their own self. And that just kind of fills you up. And then you get, your check. And the check clearly explains that, look, these were the costs, but really, like, what is such a meal worth? We're not going to give you a suggested donation price because we don't know what it's worth to you. Only you know, right? And when you trust them in such a way, it again evokes a very different feeling. So you put all of these things together, and in between you might have had somebody sing a happy birthday song. You might have had you might have had your server come in, and they're a volunteer, so they're just connecting with you, and they might tell you a story that might move you, or they might leave you something on your table, or a guest might have come in and they would bring a bouquet of flowers. This happens a lot. Right? They would bring a bouquet of flowers, and we would say, well, this is for Karma Kitchen volunteers. They would just give it to us. And we would say, well, Karma Kitchen is everybody, so let's open up the bouquet, and let's give it to random guests. Right? Now, and so when you get it, it's not like a promotional material like, that you're trying to spin something. You're literally, it's like someone who came before you, their cup of gratitude overflowed. They brought in these flowers. They gave it to us, and we're just distributing it, and you're welcome to then pay it forward and spread the ripple of love in the world. Right? And this is unrelated to your whole meal altogether. Right? So when you have that kind of thing, or someone singing happy birthday, and then someone says, oh, I can sing it in Spanish, and someone's like, I can sing it in Tamil, and it just kind of creates this whole ambiance, and you're just like, wow, like, this is real, right? Mm-hmm. It's a part of you just clicks. And if you can create such a strong context, then I think this generosity, as we frame it, is very regenerative. Right? It's not like I have to, if I have to sell you Coca-Cola, you're gonna get tired of like drinking that. So I have to keep on advertising and bringing all these like different actors and actresses in front of you to tell you, wait a second, it's cool to keep on, going on, right? Versus like this thing is supported by nature. Right? It's like there's no one trying to spin anything, but it's just that you have a propensity towards greater connection, and that propensity is what is going to propel. You're going to receive a generous act, and you're going to pay it forward because your cup of gratitude is going to overflow. And how people pay forward, how much they pay forward, that's going to be very dependent on so many different factors. But our thinking was that in aggregate, it would work out, and it has. What you said is very legitimate, right? It's that how will I respond to this? Like, will I respond with gratitude? Right? It's like, wow, someone before me did this and I have a chance to pay it forward. And there's a gratitude that like emerges, right? In many people. But like you said, there's also a sense of guilt. Right? A lot of people will say, oh, wait a second, yeah, I kind of, yeah, all right, I kind of should, and all right, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do that. Or it can even be more complex than that, because if you're in a peer group, then it's like, okay, if everyone's leaving a 20, I don't want to leave a 10, and then it can create that kind of a setting, right? But I think that if you look at the whole supply chain, if you want to call it that, right, if you look at the whole process of what actually happens, our purpose is not to tell you whether you go in gratitude or guilt, but our purpose is actually to help you just ask the question, which is one step before that, is that we actually want to confuse you with that very question. Because if we're out there to get money, there are so many different ways to do that. You can even start to benchmark it at a certain price. You can say, but we don't even have a suggested price. The reason why we don't have a suggested price is because we want people to ask this question, which is that if something is offered to you without a price, how much is its value? Which is to say, what is something worth without a price tag? And we have to you cannot turn everything into a market. Right? You can have a market economy, but really it's not a good idea to have a market society. Right? Society has to have things that don't have a price tag. And so here we're sensitizing people to learn to navigate their own terrain. Whatever's in them is going to come out, right? And which is to say that, is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative? Or how do I handle it with other people? How do I process a whole community that's behaving in this way, right? How do I process receiving from volunteers, right? In our house, we run these awaken circles, which now run all over the world as well. But 17 years ago, my parents and I, well, actually my mom, another friend, and I, we sat down and we said, look, we're going to sit in silence for an hour. And we're going to open up the door. If anyone else wants to come, they can come in. And second hour, we would have dinner in silence, because my mom was thinking, this is 17 years ago. She's like, I got to feed you, Nipun, so anyone else who comes, I'll feed them too, And then in the third hour, in the second hour, we would do a circle of sharing. And in the third hour, my mom would feed everyone. And over the years, tens of thousands of people have come. And there's no price, there's no donation box. And you would be surprised, Raj. A lot of people would come in. Not a lot, but there are people who I met this one particular guy. I met him in a different city in Southern California, and he was like, "Man, what your parents are doing is amazing." And he kind of knows that there's like 65 people that come every week, and that's our limit, and there's like a wait list, and everyone feels elated and all this. But so I said, oh, so you go. I travel, so sometimes I can't make it. I thought maybe I haven't seen him. And he's like, nah, yeah, I've been there once. And I was very confused. I was like, wow, if you're raving about this, like, how come you've just gone once, right? And he said, I couldn't go a second time. And I said, well, what do you mean? It's like open. Anyone can go. You just have to RSVP. And he's like, yeah, but there was no donation box. And I was just uncomfortable having a meal without paying for it, right? Like, and what is that, right? As a culture, what is that kind of a response to say, I don't want to take anything from somebody because I haven't paid them back? You're so entrenched in the transaction mindset that you feel like you need to pay everyone back, that you feel, and that's a very arrogant position to be in, that you feel that you have the capacity to pay everyone back, right? Because if you break it down, think of our moms. How in the world are we going to pay back 9 months of a gift that starts our life? Buddha was asked at one point, Buddha someone says, talking about parents, and Buddha says you can have your mom on one shoulder and dad on the other shoulder, and you can, ever since you were born, well, hypothetically speaking, you take care of every single one of their desires till they die. You would still be unable to fulfill their debt. Right? And this is the Buddha talking about this. Right? So we are to think that we can pay back for everything is sort of a mentality that we have created. But how can we start to undo some of that and realize that, look, our life starts with a gift. And then it is incumbent on us. Since we can't pay back, what can we do? We can learn the art of receiving it. And once we learn the art of receiving it, a part of that process is to allow your gratitude to overflow and pay it forward.
Thanks for watching my interview with Nipun. I hope that you found it useful. And I also hope that it helped you gain greater clarity on many of the concepts that we discussed this week. With that, let me say avjo to you, which is bye-bye in Gujarati for now. Please don't forget to watch the next video in which we're going to be measuring your happiness levels for the second time in this course.